We got home from that day and got a frantic phone call from his girlfriend. And she just said, it's bad, really bad.
The Cumberland County Sheriff's Department confirms that a deputy died in an overnight crash. Chester Goad was 21 years old and a deputy with the Corrections Division in Cumberland County. The sheriff's office says he was off duty at the time of the crash, and they also say he always handled himself with professionalism. He will be missed.
When I first started this podcast, one of the things I never wanted to shy away from is a story that would be really hard to tell. Staying true to that, this episode contains a heartbreaking memoir. For those of you who are new here, my name is Stephen, and I have the amazing privilege of being the host of the Nook podcast, which is, by and large, a collection of stories about people who have encountered the God of the universe in some incredibly profound ways. None of the stories are polished and pretty, because I believe that we who follow Christ do a watching world a terrible disservice when we portray a life of faith as easy or perfect. In this episode, I have the honor of introducing you to Chester Goad. He is like so many people I have had as guests here. I previously only knew him through, well, and I say knew him with air quotes, through social media. While we may claim to know someone in those odd digital spaces, we must also admit that the knowledge is incredibly shallow at best. That is, until someone shares something that goes well beyond the edited version of themselves. In the fall of 2022, I saw that Chester posted that his son had been killed in a car accident. A little over a year later, as I was formulating how to come at a series of episodes about the importance of renewing our minds in Christ, I remembered the story of Chester's son. I will admit that I was a little hesitant in asking him if he would be interested in telling that story here. But his warm and willing response not only spoke of the great love he has for his son, but also the healing he is experiencing. So settle in for this conversation with Chester Goad and a bit of a celebration of the life of his son, Corban. Tell me about the birth of your son.
Corban came along back in 2000. He was really strong from the get-go. It just struck us immediately. Corban was 7 pounds, 11 ounces, and his name came from Mark 7:11, and he grew very quickly. And one of our tip-offs that we're like, okay, this kid's going to be super strong, was he fell down on the concrete at church on the sidewalk, and just we had that moment.
Yeah,
because
the big gasp.
And he just hopped back up, and we're like, okay, and it was from that point on, there were other instances where, he cracked his head at the county fair and needed like the equivalent of stitches. At the time they were doing those steri strips, whatever, but didn't faze him, and so he just from birth on was a strong kid, strong baby.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's obvious pride, even in just a quick look into something from 23 years ago. Tell me about your relationship. Was it just always super tight with him?
Oh, yeah, pretty much. I mean, we were typical dad son in the sense that we did butt heads some as well, but we Oh, we did. We did everything. We spent tons of time together. We loved going on trips together. And we, as a family, we would watch sports together. We were just a typical family, I guess you could say. But yeah, I would say if you were going to ask were we tight, yeah, absolutely we were. Yeah, miss him every day. So
yeah. Well, if there was one event, one type of thing that was guaranteed that the two of you would want to do together, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I think of definitely ball games, for sure. Any kind of ball game, especially traveling. You love the Baltimore Ravens, huge Baltimore Ravens fan, and so we followed them ever since he was little. And then he also liked Memphis Grizzlies, so we would drive out to Memphis, and so anything around sports we would do in a heartbeat. And then he and I both share a love for Buffalo Wild Wings. And so my wife was not a huge fan of that. So we would run off and do those kinds of things together,
Well, you said you butted heads. And as soon as you said that, I think about, good grief, any number with a teen after it that was my dad and I. And it's probably the case for pretty much every one of us. But was he mischievous? What was the type of thing that he would? I mean, I was horrible at doing homework is the first thing that comes to mind, and Dad was on me for that. What comes to mind for you in something like that?
Well, there's a couple different things, yeah, mischievous. Absolutely. There would be nothing for me to be asleep on the couch during the winter and get beamed with a snowball. I mean, that absolutely right in the face, And
you said on the couch.
Yeah.
In the house.
On the couch. He would bring the ball in and just beam me with it. And to the point that you're shocked and stunned.
Sure.
You're like, what happened,
How did he get along with his mom?
Oh my gosh. Those two truly adored each other. Yeah, absolutely. They didn't butt heads nearly as much as we did. My wife would laugh and she'd say, it's because you're both so much alike,
Oh yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. But no, he was super good to his mama and they had a very special relationship. We would do a family trip, but then we also would split off, and I would take Corban on trips, and then Joy would take Corban. He was the only child, so there was no one we were leaving at home.
Right. Easy to take attendance like that.
Exactly. So Joy would take him on a trip somewhere, and they like to go maybe out to Seattle or up to, we have some extended family that has a cabin that's up for use for all of our family members. And so they would go to the family cabin. I mean, we would all do those things, but we like to go off on our own and spend time in our own ways with each other as well. So
that's awesome. Did he have big aspirations? I mean, if you had asked him when he was a kid what he wanted to be when he grew up, what was the likely answer?
Yeah, it was, well, it depend on his age.
Oh, sure. Every kid we go through different iterations.
every young boy at one point wants to be a professional athlete or something, that they say. But he was serious about sports. But he also loved anything like emergency related, responder related kind of thing. And there's a cool picture of him in preschool, decked out in an actual. The people who come and try to sell their wares at the preschool, so they take pictures of your kids in costumes. Anyway, but there we have a picture of him, and he chose to have a picture as a firefighter and also as a police officer, and so we still have those, and that's really cool, So,
what did he do right after high school?
So he went to college. He went to college first. He went to Tennessee Tech University, which is where my wife and I met, and also where his grandparents met as well. So it's the university where I work today in my day job. And so he went there, and at first was an exercise science major because he's a big workout guy. He's always working out into so much exercise, very disciplined. And then immediately came to us, and he was reffing for intramurals and things like that. And he's like, you know what, this is something I enjoy doing. I don't want what I enjoy doing to be my job.
That's smart though.
I thought that was interesting. So he immediately started working to change his major to criminal justice so he could go into law enforcement. So COVID happened. And he ended up, like a lot of students, taking online classes on campus, living on campus, taking online, it's just miserable. had been working on changing his major to criminal justice. And he was like, Dad, I guess at one point he was like, Dad, I'm kind of miserable here. He called me. We were letting him live on campus. So we were like, if you want to go to tech, you can get the full experience, So he was living on campus, but it wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah. Well, sure. That whole experience was what a wet blanket.
Exactly. And so he said, I'm miserable. And I said, well, there's no sense in being miserable. Just come on home. And I think he was shocked that I said that. And I'm just come on. And so, we moved him out quickly and he was back at the house. And he said, you know what? He had worked for a moving company all through high school. They actually showed up at the high school and they were like, give us some big boys, big, strong boys. We want to pay them to move boxes.
So that's good recruiting right there.
Yeah, that was so smart. But he did that. And so he thought, well, I'll go back to the moving company until I can get on with local law enforcement. And so he ended up doing that. And he got on with our sheriff's department. And there at the jail, the way they work at the sheriff's department is it's entry level. So everybody starts out in the jail portion before you get moved up and to get your car and all the things. And so he was working in the jail at the time that he passed away.
So he was really on track to do what he had always wanted to do.
Yeah. Awesome. I think so.
Was there anything out of the norm going on in your circle when he passed?
Everything was great as things could be. In fact, the day all this went down, when Corban went to heaven, he had gone with his girlfriend. They'd gone on a day trip. I think they'd gone to some races, and Joy and I had gone to Pigeon Forge, and we very rarely get to do those little day trips together. And so we'd gone up there and we had said over and over, it was a beautiful day. The weather was great. We had, just doing all sorts of things that we enjoyed doing. And we had both said to each other, this is a great day. Verbal. Most people don't go around, this is a great day. Right. But we really were having a good day. We're like, this is so great. And we texted back and forth a bit with Corban, just minimal. And we got home from that day, and I'm very goofy, and I have a TikTok, and I had just started, TikToking and doing all this silly stuff. And so I had taken some video up in Pigeon Forge, and I was at home on the couch creating, and got a frantic phone call from his girlfriend. And it all just kind of went from there. So
what was she able to, the frantic, I'm sure that's not even a word that begins to sum up, but what was she able to tell you? Or, for that matter, what were you able to understand?
Right. Well, first of all, I answered the phone and she was screaming. And I said, you're going to have to stop screaming. I don't understand what you're saying. And she just said, it's bad. It's bad, really bad. And so I was like, okay. And she said they are, without a whole lot of details. She wasn't giving me details. It was like spurts of information. They're saying they're going to live flight him somewhere. And she's like, I don't know what to do, all this. And he had left her house. He had dropped her off and probably wasn't 3 miles from her house where this accident took place, and had left the road. His car had flipped a couple times. He landed in trees.
Oh, wow.
And they ended up they were trying to cut him out of the trees. And anyway, so she had called, and I woke my wife up, and I was like, we've got to do something. They're going to life flight him. And we live in a very rural area. This happened to county over in a way more rural area. And so we were waiting for information. Where is it going to be life flighted to? And it made no sense to drive this distance if we didn't know it was going to be in Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville. Where are they taking him? And so as luck would have it, one of my very best friends, who also worked at the sheriff's department, not with Corban, but at the sheriff's department, pulled into our driveway. And like I said, this happened a county over. So he was tipped off by our Facebook, because I remember saying, everybody, please pray. The information. And so he came over and he's like, guys, what are we doing? And I gave him the basic information. And so because he's in law enforcement, he could get a little bit of information, and he was walking back and forth over. And then we get a text message that says, they're not going to life flight him anymore. They've decided not to do that. Okay, so this is where my wife and I, we diverge, because she immediately said in her spirit, she knew what had happened. When they said they were not going to flight him anymore, she knew. I had this glimmer of hope. And so I'm thinking, oh, it's not nearly as bad as they thought it was, So my friend, he says, let me get over here on my radio. And so he comes back and he says, guys, Corban didn't make it. And I remember, I don't remember much, but I remember absolutely losing it in our front yard. I think about weeping and wailing, and we can talk about this later, but I've been learning about lamentations and what it means. And I just remember just screaming, and my wife was silent, over there. We reacted so differently. And that's how we learned of it. And my friend we drove to him. He said, let me drive you there. And he informed that law enforcement that we were coming, the emergency first responders, that we were coming. So we get on the site, we walk hand in hand with his girlfriend to the ambulance, where at that time they'd already cut him out. They'd already taken him to the ambulance. They hadn't cleaned up. They were like, we want to give you a few minutes with him. So we're sitting in the ambulance, just my wife and I at that point. And the ME comes on site and says, these first responders would like to talk to you. And so we're like, okay, sure. They come in and they're, so professional and so kind, but you could tell they're visibly shaken. And I just think, wow, these folks, look at the work that they do, And they said, we wanted to tell you we had a conversation with Corban before he passed away. And they said that's very rare to be able to have conversations like that. Ask him his name, he told them. Ask him his age, he told them. Where do you work? He told them. He also offered that he said, guys, I'm paralyzed. And they were like, well, we're working on you. We're going to try to get you out of there. And a few minutes later, they're working frantically to get him out. And they hear him say, well, guys, I'm going to leave. Something to that effect. And they were like, wait, hold on, and he's like, I'm going to leave. And they wanted us to know they'd had that conversation with him before he passed away.
Wow. What did that mean to you? Just to know that he still had that last little bit of energy, bit of life.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that. For me, it was confirmation of so many different things, of his relationship with God and our family's faith, in a sense. I think it was a kind of a, I feel like, as God kind of letting us know he's going to be fine. He's fine. So in a sense, it meant that, but also it was just at times when I think about it, and we will talk about this with people when they ask, but when you go through something traumatic like this, you do experience some PTSD and so forth. And there are times that I think about him in those trees alone, even before first responders getting there. Obviously he was conscious, and it's super painful to think about. I'm like, this is your kid.
So this is one of those times where there's the interviewer in me that can't wait to ask you questions. And then there's the father in me that, my condolences, sir. I honestly cannot imagine anything worse to ever have to even comprehend, let alone actually walk through. What were those next few days? I mean, it's in my mind, I'm just thinking I go numb and do exactly the minimum that I have to.
Yeah. Well, I think we, energy kicked in, and we were like, we have to do this, and we have to do this, the right way. And we have, to honor him. And as life would have it, one of our good friends had also lost her son a couple of years prior. She knew what this was like. She reached out to us and she said, "Let me help you do this.
Oh, wow.
Let me help you through this, all this." And she said, "Just let me handle it." And we were like, "Go for it, handle it." And so I remember first coming home that night, and I told my wife, I'm like, "Look, people are going to be looking to us. And I do believe that people need to see genuine faith acted out." At the same time, I also want people to see that we have hope and those kinds of things. And so my wife said she had to go to bed and she crashed, and I said, I have got to write an obituary. So I had to do two things. I had to write a social media post, because as much as people say social media can be a bad thing, it's also a very positive thing in the sense that I was able to get a lot of information out at one point.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to say it again over and over and over and over, And so I wrote a post and put that out, and I wrote an obituary, saved it, and I went to bed. And then our friend took over, and she was just saying, "All right, we want to celebrate him. How do we want to celebrate him?" And she would say, "Okay, let's celebrate every aspect of him." So she would come by the house and she would say, "I'm going to pick up anything related to sports. I'm going to pick up anything related to high school. I'm going to pick up anything related to college. I'm going to pick up anything related to work." And she would say, "Put these things on the table. I will come and get them." And so we would gather up the things that were special, and she would come and get them. And then she was behind the scenes having all sorts of things done for us, ministering to us in a way that only someone who has grieved before could do.
Yeah.
And, it was beautiful, honestly, looking back at it. We're so appreciative of all of our friends, but especially for her for doing that. She's also just a really strong believer. We share the same faith, and I think it had to absolutely be exhausting. But I've learned through all of this how much it means to comfort another person, for them to get some sort of comfort from you. It's therapeutic, truly therapeutic, to help someone else, and so. It meant a whole lot. We walked up to the church because we had Corban's service in the gym where he played basketball regularly.
That's nice.
And yeah. And so we walked into displays that she had beautifully put together. It was unbelievable. Professional signs made that had scripture on them. Corban Strong. I mean, to all these different things that she had done. And we could not be more blessed from that.
Tell me what you remember about his memorial service.
I remember law enforcement and first responders being there. I remember all of his friends. I remember his friends eulogizing him, and one of his coaches, his athletic trainer, and others speaking. And it was really, we made it through that on literally on prayers, because I don't know how we made it through that, but we did not speak. We chose not to do that. Some people do that. And I think it was probably best that I did not try to do that. But it was beautiful, and I think it honored him.
Yeah.
So,
well, and even without you speaking, I can only imagine just watching so many come forward and speak so kindly of this young man that you raised had to be a better blessing than anything you could have tried to articulate in a moment like that.
It was. And I have to tell you, his friends have been amazing. They stay in touch with me. A couple of his best friends check in with me regularly. We have one who comes and sits with us at the house. It means the world to us that he still comes over and wants to be a part, and we just passed the year mark. We also, Corban's birthday was this past weekend. His friends reached out, sent us thoughts, memories without us asking anybody to do anything like that.
Yeah.
So I do have a funny memorial story though.
Oh, tell.
So if you can have such a thing. Apparently what we didn't know was going on behind the scenes was there was a cat that was trying to get in, a little kitten. a bobtail kitten that kept trying to run into the memorial service, and the funeral workers and other people kept throwing the cat back out. They're like, "What in the world?" And so it comes to the point where the receiving line is being cut off because the service is getting ready to start, and someone opens the door, and that cat runs in, essentially into my wife's arms. And it was just ridiculous, you know. And so a few minutes later, one of my good friends says, "Yeah, I think you got a new cat." And I was like, "No. I said we already have two cats. We're not getting another cat, you know." So I learned that the cat had gone home with a friend who does a lot of animal rescue work, and I thought, that's perfect. And so the next day, I see my wife has a list on the kitchen table, and it has all these things that she's got to do. It's a regular to-do list, and then on there it says preacher. And I was like, "Is the preacher coming by?" And typically we call our pastor, you know, and it said preacher. And I said, and she said, "No, that's the new cat. And his name is Preacher." I'm going to get it.
Nice.
And so Preacher's still around, you know. And,
I've always been big on words, meanings, and just, you know, better ways to say things. And just because you mentioned it a moment ago, you said that he went to heaven.
mm-hmm.
Is that the way you choose to say or to speak about his passing?
Yeah, my wife just uses that terminology more than I do. I will usually say he left us or he went to heaven. Yeah, so because it was made clear to us through our conversation with the first responders that he left us, you know, from what they shared with us. And so I prefer that. And, you know, there's, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's just something we choose to say. You know, sometimes it'll come out and I'll say passed away. I think both of us have gasped. We'll like literally gasp if we say that he died.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that just doesn't feel right, you know.
Well, this whole series that I'm in the middle of doing about the importance of renewing our minds. As you said that's what struck me, is that even just by stating it that way has to be just one of those. I mean, obviously that you'll probably be mourning this kid of yours for the rest of your life, but to choose to say something like that he went to heaven has to be a part of that renewal. That, I mean, is there a greater solace for anyone who has lost someone that they love than to know that kid's with Jesus?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It makes me so happy. And I, with his competitive spirit, you know, I tell people, and I really mean this, I do believe that when I see him one day, he will say he beat me. Like I truly.
Oh, Chester, I so love that.
You know, I think he'll say he beat me, you know. But this has not been easy. It's I can say honestly, I have been asked many things, and I honestly, we try to be open books about this, but people have asked me, have I been angry with God? And something that Joy and I have both. It's the strangest thing. We just really haven't had that. We've had, you know, confusion, obviously, great sorrow, grief. I can say that I haven't had, I've had moments of being ticked off at God, you know, we've had some conversations, but I have not lived a life, not even momentarily, of being angry with him, because these things are not exclusive to Joy and myself. Yeah. These things happen to people, and it's terrible and it sucks, you know. But you know, I can't. We will never know what happened. They have, you know, of course, they did all the tests and the state troopers and all the different things, and you know, the thing that keeps coming back is, you know, this is a mystery, and most people said that the deer are so bad in that area that it's very likely that he had, maybe was going fast because a lot of kids do, but that it was probably swerving to get out of the way of a deer. And I honestly think that's probably the case. But we don't know that.
Yeah.
We will never know that until later on,
Are there other ways that you have found in this grieving to renew your mind, to stay in that right place with God and not lean so much into the quizzings and anger or anything else that can kind of fall on the other side of it?
Yeah, well, we were very fortunate in that the year leading up to Corban leaving us, Joy and I had been teaching a class on Heaven by Randy Alcorn. And so it would have been Corban's age group, but he was dating somebody, so he wasn't coming to our church very much at all. And so he wasn't really in on that, but his friends were, and so we had already been thinking in terms of afterlife, eternal things, those kinds of things, and all that. So I do feel like that helped. That definitely helps me now, because I tend to kind of want to continue to study that. It's something I'm very interested in. There's also a guy on TikTok, Brad Zockrell. I don't know if you know him, but he does similar stuff, but he does it in very small snippets. So it's very interesting. But I would say, trying to take my thoughts captive because I will spiral sometimes, especially because when something like this happens, you don't sleep well, you don't eat well, you don't, and by that, I mean, I will either eat everything in sight or I will eat nothing. So it's kind of, it's lots of different perspectives on that. But, I had a friend who kind of gave me a great perspective one day. And this friend said, I said, I don't know what to do. I'm having a really rough week. And my friend said, I was just reading the other day that in a spirit of heaviness, put on a garment of praise. And they said, I feel like what you have to do is you have to force yourself to worship even when you don't feel like it. And that was one of the wisest things that because what I've started doing is, if I'm having those moments where I'm spiraling or I'm having a really bad day or week or whatever, I will turn the stereo in my car up on worship music. And even when I don't want to. And here's the thing about that, when you injure yourself or when you're injured, you want to treat it and you put some medication on it. Sometimes it stings, right? Yeah. And the same, it's like worship is medicine, but in the middle of grief, it can sting. I will say this, it took us a little bit to get back to church. We are back at church, but I'd been involved in the worship team and things like that, and I'm not anymore. Not because I'm opposed to worship. I love worship, but because emotionally I can't handle being up there right now. It's not the right place right now at this moment in time, and I don't know that it ever will be again. We'll see. But what I've noticed is that worship songs are painful. It stings sometimes because some of the stuff that you're singing about when you're someone who is grieving, it can hurt, in a good way. But like I said, it's medicine. But it's good for you, but it doesn't mean that it always feels great.
Yeah. Well, and it's got to give you a whole new perspective on, I don't know. I feel like it's a saying I've heard for decades of the sacrifice of praise.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I love the story that you told about the friend of yours that was able to step in because of her familiarity with the whole situation. That's got to have you with the radar up in, if you were ever given the same opportunity to be able to step in and take care of someone the way that you were taken care of.
Yes. I have to say, I have, and I think my wife as well, we've been impacted by this in such a way that we are very compassionate to hurting people, way more than we've ever been. Perhaps it's going to sound weird, but I've used the term slapped into it. In other words, slapped into the reality that there are hurting people out there. And, I tell people sometimes that when this happened to me, I walked around feeling slapped across the face for really, it's very shocking. This is not the way things were supposed to work out, but this is the life that I have now, And so when I look around me and I am constantly scanning, and they don't have to have the same faith system as me or whatever, they don't have to have the same beliefs. I am compassionate toward hurting people, especially grieving people. And so I want people to know that there are people here who have experienced the same thing and that love them. And, we had some friends who encouraged us to go to a retreat. We went to a retreat called While We're Waiting. It's a faith-based grief retreat for parents who've lost children. And it's all different ages, all different situations and circumstances. And I can't say that you walk around there or you walk away from there and your life has changed. No. But to be around others in your situation is very therapeutic. And so it's a therapeutic weekend. It's not therapy weekend. You don't do therapy while you're there. You just share stories, and it's super therapeutic. So you asked something a minute ago, though, about what we've been doing kind of to deal or renew.
Yeah.
I thought about that when you asked me to do this. I've been thinking about it. And one thing that I can point to is both of us have found ways to be creative in grief in different ways. And so I've done literal creative things like writing and music and trying to get back to stand-up comedy, things like that. It's hard. I've had to cancel some things, but creating is it feels good to create something. And then my wife, she's into DIY and HGTV, and she loves creating in that way. And she's overseen some projects here at the house, and she's done a lot of design related things. And so both of us are coping in that way through creating. And I thought about how we're made in God's image, and He is a creator and a renewer. Mm-hmm. He is a renewer of all things. And so the only thing we have in there, we're created in His image, but we have that human side. So we have that confused side, or that the side that can be sinful or make bad decisions or just not be obedient, in different ways. And so we have that side, but at the same time, we're made in God's image, and He's a creator and a renewer. And that's one of the reasons that I really like studying heaven, because one of these days, all things are going to be renewed,
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting you said that. I want to say it was maybe this past weekend, and honestly, I can't even remember the exact context of it, but something about the statement stuck with me. And maybe it was only because I was going to be having this conversation with you, but that from pain comes beautiful art. And I don't know if you can broad brush that in every circumstance, but I believe that you are absolutely correct. If only because I've said so many times throughout my life, I am happiest when I'm creating. And I think that's hardwired from our Creator. There's nothing anyone could say to push me away from that level of thinking. So I love that you've got that kind of an outlet.
I was thinking about that today as I was thinking about our conversation. I was like, even His mercies are new every morning, and that is from a book that is specifically geared toward grief and sorrow and abandonment. And His mercies are new every morning. I am new every morning. Let me tell you, I wake up every morning. You got to put your shoes on and get moving, and you got to say, okay, how am I going to handle this day? Every day without your kid is different. Some days are a real struggle. Some days you're like, okay, I did pretty well today. And so we've got to a point where we ask each other how we're making it today. How'd you make it today? My friends now, they've caught on to that. And so I'll get a text message from a good friend pretty much daily. How'd you make it today? But I have to go back to His mercies are new every morning. And I have to have that same mindset of I got to be new every morning because his mercies are new every morning. What's it going to be today? We'll see,
This is absolutely going to be an episode I'm going to struggle with how to close. And I always like to leave space at the end. Was there perhaps something you thought we would talk about but didn't, or anything else that may have come to mind while we have been talking that you'd like to say about what you've been through, or even just Corban himself?
Yeah. Don't even get me started on that. I talk about him forever. I do. It's kind of weird. Just today on the way home, and this is just kind of where your mind goes. But I was talking with God and I said, well, Lord, can you please just tell him that I miss him? Tell him that I love him. Can you tell him, and I believe that he's faithful, and I believe he may convey that message. He doesn't do my bidding, but it would be really nice. But I will say something that people who are grieving struggle with. And I want people to know that this is okay, is building new memories. With each day that you move forward, it's a day away from the last time you saw the person that you loved. And you deal with so many feelings. It's okay to feel guilt for that. I don't think you should feel guilty for that, but I think it's something that we all struggle with, because it's like, oh, I just had a memory. I just had a good time. Was that okay? We ask ourselves these questions, My wife and I, we really struggled with how to deal with the 1 year mark, because we didn't want to be at home. The 1 year anniversary of Corban leaving us, and we don't want to be around here. And so the thing was, what do we do? Because we made the mistake last year of going to the beach for Thanksgiving, because that was a place that he loved. We're going to go somewhere he loves for the holidays. Huge mistake. Emotions everywhere. He loved the beach, and he loved the cabin, and he loved all these different things. So we can't go those places right now. So what I did was, I mentioned earlier, my wife is a big HGTV fan. She loves all this. She loves this Ben and Aaron Napier on HGTV. They have this show called Hometown. Yep. That's like, she loves that. And so I was like, I want to take her down there. We're going to do something together that we've never done as a family. So it'll be completely different, and just spend some time and make some new memories. And we will honor Corban while we're there. And listen, my kid loved to have a good time. And I remind myself, and other people remind me, he does not want me moping around. I do a lot, but I know that is something he would look at me quite honestly and say, Dad, that's stupid. He just literally would. He'd be like, that's so dumb. But when you're grieving, you let guilt step in. You let all these feelings step in, and you have to really guard that. And I go back to taking every thought captive. You got to grab it and toss it out, because it's not what God wants. No one who loves you would want you to feel guilty about having a special time together.
I've got a link in the show notes for Chester's website called corbansdad.com that stands as a tribute to his son. And he's also creating a foundation in Corban's name that will support first responders. While you're in the show notes, please check for a link to the Nook Facebook page and my social media feeds if you'd like to follow along there. If this podcast has been an encouragement to you, please take a moment to give it a 5-star rating and leave a kind review at Apple Podcasts. It's a small thing that really does help get the show more good exposure. I've still got a couple more episodes coming within this Renew the Mind series. Make sure you are subscribed on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any of it. Thank you so much for listening today, and I will catch you here next time in the Nook.
The Nook Podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.